Hello, everyone. Welcome to another sit down with Tom Pickering and David Berkeley and the Eximius Executive team. We're going through, again, more of your questions. Keep them coming in, keep challenging us. We enjoy these debates. So one of the questions this week was, what are the opportunities that have been missed during the lockdown and stuff we should be looking at, maybe addressing now? So, Tom, we'll start with you, if that's all right. What's the first obvious opportunity you think that's been missed and that we capitalise on now?
Yeah, I think it's quite dramatic, Nick. I think it's about resetting the business and financial model and actually encouraging plain talking. And yet we all seem to be very, very obsessed, in terms of not taking offence with talking about difficult things. So I think, what does this look like? What are the opportunities? I think the first one is around, the shift from growth and domination to relationships and profit, which is something I've put into practice recently and been absolutely fantastic, actually, to get back to the core business. The flip side of this, I think, which I'm noticing, is people working for meaningless businesses or businesses that they've become aware that don't sort of tick their boxes in terms of making sense to people and providing meaning. And one high level, I can't talk about confidential things that I may be working on, but one high level one is Google, who have really clamped down on free speech, and they've gone from being, and I think that's got a lot to do with their purpose not being particularly attractive and people challenging it. So I think it's very important that people do care. I think as well, the symptoms of not getting it right is a lot of the secondary things that are happening, which are around commodity prices going through the roof. I think these are symptoms of, a bigger issue, unwinding globalization, working with the wrong people like China. And I think the other thing is actually putting prices up as well. So at its simplest level, I think we need to put prices up to reduce consumption so we make more profit. The other one is create work as well, Nick. I mean, a lot of people are automating stuff, and in fact, our well-being is highly dependent on work. One of the things I've learned from some of the businesses I've worked on is, having got the sustainability side of the business right, you realize how hard work it is, and actually reusing stuff is actually very difficult and requires a real focus, and actually means you're going to be making less profit. And it's about adjusting to these things. So there is a cost doing this. Local, important, reducing tech. I mean, tech is what I describe as being a mass psychosis at the moment. The dialogue is very powerful. It's very difficult to reject. But some of the thoughts at its simplest level, that we are more connected than we ever were. Actually, I think we're atomized. And we're spending far too much time. So this is the sort of mantra that is misleading people. And I think the last thing I'd just add before David tears off like a raging bull is the importance of local and community. And I mean, the natural sort of train of thought is to compete. I think that's absolutely right. But I think there's something very important which I've learned, which is supporting the local ecosystem. And practically the businesses I've started locally, actually, it's been very interesting, because my loyal customers have come back to me when I've started businesses, trying to create rumors and stuff about what I've been doing. And I've gone back to these businesses and said, look, I'm not going to put up with this, right? Let's collaborate. Let's be reasonable with each other. Let's take more of an ecosystem view rather than a short-sighted view. So I think that's the sort of the opportunities, I think, Nick, that I'm seeing. And I think the sum total of that is far greater profit and far stronger relationships, which actually is what good looks like. And yet everybody's preoccupied with growth and domination. So that's a quick appetizer.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfect. That's perfect. There's quite a bit to digest through there. David, what's the one missed opportunity you think has been during the lockdown?
I was making some notes before, and Tom rattled through a couple of mine. But I think one of the things is probably real vision and engagement, which kind of goes back to slightly sort of steps on Tom's realignment point, which is also one of mine that I was going to say. But I think the vision and engagement piece is just so important, that people know why they're there and what is their purpose, what is their function in a business, and what does that do to change the world or to change that business, or what impact do they have? Because I think that speaks into a lot of the mental health problems that are going on at the moment, because people don't know why they're doing what they're doing, or what impact what they do is actually having. Very unfairly, I was running a workshop yesterday for a company, or day before yesterday, very recently, and there's the newest person on the senior management team. I said, this is incredibly unfair, but what is the vision of the business? And there was a long pause. I said, it's sort of something to do with, rattle off an answer. And then I said to the CEO, what is your vision for the business? And he said something different. Similar, same sort of ballpark, just a completely different ball they were playing with. And this is the newest person on. He'd just done his onboarding into the company within a couple of weeks, and he couldn't say fundamentally what the business was there to do, like what the vision of the business was, and what was his role in doing that. And that's not a problem. And I was not singling anybody out there, because I think the vast majority of businesses are like that don't spend time looking at what is it, how to connect that individual with what they're doing and what they're trying to achieve. And if you can connect an individual's drivers and motivations towards the company's goal and vision, then you're going to really tap into that productivity, going the extra mile, real engagement with the business, because people then, it speaks straight to their purpose of why they're there. So I think that's one of the things that people should be doing more of at the moment, because that will certainly help reduce some of the mental health impacts, as well as a whole load of other things.
I think that's great. And Tom, what advice would you give to sort of leaders covering a couple of the points, pick one of the points you've sort of covered. What's a bit of advice you'd give to a leader for addressing some of the issues you just raised?
Yeah, I think, well, for a start, acknowledge the fact you've probably got it completely wrong as a starting point, and take it on the chin. So if you take the point that David just made, I would say, first, well, there are some businesses which are fundamentally flawed, Nick. So I think quite a lot of tech businesses are what I describe as being parasitic or very little value add, or actually they do the opposite of some of the things I've just talked about in terms of reducing work. And I think people are not going to put up with it, that, Nick. So you can put as many lily flavored sweeties in the jar, but actually that sort of thing I think has become quite repulsive, actually, and people may not articulate it. And I think that's the sort of challenge, and making money just isn't good enough anymore. You can see that the heroes have gone from being the tech whizzy people driving flash Ferraris to nurses, and I think that there's been a real reset there that has to be acknowledged. I think I get what David just said, and I think I'd capture that in terms of the fundamental purpose of the business versus the sort of criteria I set out. Are the businesses making money? Are they developing relationships? Are they supporting local? Those sorts of things, and of course making more profit, which is related to relationships. But I'd also say, as long as that is okay, then just acknowledge people for who they are, Nick. Just listen, take an active interest in who they are, acknowledge and really relish a diverse view. So, and that actually is the one thing I think that, assuming that, well, for a start, really take it on the chin, really challenge yourself against some sensible criteria. I think the reality, the corollary to that is that what's happening is, when I look at some of the bigger businesses I'm working with, they're not looking at risk, right? So some of the bigger opportunities I'm looking at in automotive world, Nick, around electrification of cars, and no one's thinking about the really big issues like lithium supply globally. No one's thinking about the fact that no one can produce electric cars fast enough to replace the petrol cars, and what will happen to the petrol cars, okay, as well as doing the day job. And it's very important to get people thinking about that sort of stuff as well, and that requires free dialogue, and that requires people saying, look, Nick, this is wrong. So and that's about really healthy dialogue and creating a framework to put that in. But having got that framework right, you've got to let people do their jobs, Nick. And just simply, my single piece of advice, just having got that structure right, which is another way of reframing what David just said, is just listen to what people are saying, value different views, and let them do their jobs.
I think that's spot on. I mean, it's absolutely spot on. And David, coming back to Tom's point earlier, and sort of just plain talking, how are you seeing businesses adapt to getting people talking again, especially as a lot is still split between remote and actually returning to an office?
The truthful answer is not seeing an awful lot of it. I think we're still in very much in the sort of the work meetings of functional meetings. So it's this is what we're here to do. Let's thrash out the agenda. And I just had a client call recently with someone who's got 2 new people on their senior management team. They're viewing the company differently. Then they've got a different ethos, and how they're working, how they're approaching the objectives of the company. And he said, we just have these management meetings where everyone's just bashing heads. It's like, well, of course, because you don't understand the people that are there. Everyone hasn't spent the time to develop the relationships to understand why people are saying what they're saying. Everybody's right and everybody's wrong from how they see the world. That's not, that's a great thing to know, but it's also your biggest problem. The reason why there's problems is because everyone's doubling down on what they think is right, and therefore everyone else is wrong, or other fractions are wrong. And so I said, look, just have time to understand each other. Just have a meeting just of why you here. What do you want to get from this role, this business? What would this mean to you if the company grows to this, or it's achieved X in terms of the market, or whatever it is, in terms of the product that it's creating and how it's helping people? Because then at least you can understand people's own motivations. Chances are it's not going to be about how they're going to make more money out of it, or this is going to propel me into the next job. It's going to be because I really believe in what we're doing, and this is why I think we're doing it. Right, now you can have a proper conversation as a team as to why you're doing what you're doing, because you can at least understand where each other are coming from, and take the time to do that. Just build that kind of understanding of differing viewpoints. They might not be right, they might not be good, but at least if you can start doing that, then that will really help productive dialogue.
Yeah.
So removing assumptions and getting back to basics of like, why are we here? What is your general view on the business? What is your general view on the challenge? Just resetting a wider view of people's agendas and missions, and just start to see if they can get roughly aligned or help people point in the same direction, right, before getting into the bigger meatier topics.
Yeah, because actually what you find is everyone is pointing in the same direction usually. They just have a different view of how to get there. That's most of the time people got the same underlying drivers for the business. Underlying drivers, what they're trying to do in terms of helping people, developing the talent underneath them, whatever it is. They just have very different ways of talking about it and articulating it. But when people actually unpack what they're saying, people take the time to listen to them, that's when you can really go, okay, right. I thought you were talking about something completely different, but actually we're on the same line. You're just talking about it from a different way of looking at it. That's great. Now I can understand that a bit more.
Yeah, I think it's one thing I'd add to that, Nick, which is there's a very famous book written, I can't remember what the hell it's called, but I'll quote it anyway, which is that you never persuade anybody to do anything different, right? But what you can do is understand someone else's view, okay? And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. There's an expectation that you can, somehow get inside someone's head and rewire them. You simply can't. And so you're squandering a huge amount of value if you do that, because you want them to think. So the challenge is, how do you create the structure to do that? And it's just what David just described. It's about taking interest in people, and actually the funny thing about it is you get far faster results counterintuitively, because the reality for leaders is that we need to find the humility to accept that we don't know better, and let people do their jobs, because we don't. Every time I ever step in to anything, despite the fact I might have seen it 50 different times, I don't assume that I know better, because that person knows the detail far better than I do. And actually, the other thing I'd say is that very often people respond to the face value statement, which might be an awkward statement that was just thrown out there, which they didn't mean to say. They're not articulate themselves, but when you ask a question, you can actually get through that. So you can, sometimes people say stupid things because they feel uncomfortable. But actually, when you just let them be themselves and get them more comfortable, then actually, just got to find the courage to let go. And I think particularly at the moment, we talked a bit about this humility and leadership, Nick. We really got to go in with a whole different level of humility to say that we have really badly screwed this up, and my job is servant leadership. It's not having set the broad, the broad objectives. It's down to you guys to make it happen, and I'm here to help you.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. And it sounds to me that in this world of efficiency where people want to just, as David was saying, get to the next meeting, crunch through it, very transactional. It sounds like they're just creating more issues that are appearing in that process, and just taking step backs and adding in maybe that additional meeting to set the scene, or a discovery meeting, let's call it, is going to help you save a massive amount of time down the road, because you're not going to be dealing with the not infighting, but just the different views, directional views, ethos, different approaches, which sounds like they could be ironed out relatively quick. Is that a fair interpretation of what you're saying, David?
Yeah, I think exactly. And as I said to this person the other day, I was like, Abraham Lincoln's got a great quote. Oh, there's a great quote attributed to Abraham Lincoln, I should probably say, which is, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. And I think most of the time people are smacking away at a tree stump with a very, very, very blunt axe, thinking that if they hit it just a little bit harder, it'll actually, start cutting through, but it won't. And actually, it's just taking that time to sit back and go, right, why are we all here? What are we all going to contribute to this? Why are we, why do we think we're the best people to do that? What is it, what are the challenges that we see? What are the fears that we have about it? And let's talk about it. And that way, when you get to the actual project, it's going to be 100 times easier.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. And I think Tom raised something about sort of the mission of the business and why they're driving forward. And it reminded me of just people's skill sets. Like, some people in jobs, or quite a lot of people in jobs, have a very firm view of what they want to get out of that job. So if you are a certain developer, you want to work on this product because it's going to help develop you and further your career. The wider mission of the business might actually fade away in that. And I think leaders need to understand that and get under the skin of it, because once that part of the mission's over, they're out of challenge. They're probably going to leave that organization anyway. And that's cool, and that's fine. I think that's good. And I think I've also seen it as a failing where highly talented people who are going to drastically improve the business growing are not enabled to get into certain positions because they can't drink the Kool-Aid of what the mission or culture is meant to be as well. So all of a sudden they're just lying for a process to say how unbelievably passionate they are about screwdrivers, when actually all they're really passionate about is the technology behind the screwdriver, which they're so good at and they want to pour their heart and soul into, but they're going to sell themselves throughout to do it. Or businesses are now saying you're not good enough because you don't sleep with 10 screwdrivers under your bed like the rest of us, right? And that's great in a perfect world, but I also feel that's management sort of losing sight of the end goal, which might be delivering the best product or service to their clients, right? So I think just marrying those two together and getting the right balance between culture, mission, and understanding what people's drivers really are from it, and especially when it comes to products, because if someone is obsessed with their personal development, then the company products might take a very different shape to what is actually sort of needed, right? And that takes a very strong product manager in particular to grab it, to make sure that it's sorted. So there's just some a little bit of extra context that build upon some of the points that Tom put there. Tom, any sort of closing statement from you on this and other areas?
Yeah, I just add one thing specifically. I remember a very good guy leaving a business I was working with quite recently, and I always like to interview people when they leave. And what he said was, and I don't like good people leaving businesses as a rule, but what he said was that he wanted to do more R&D related stuff. I said, look, the business can't offer that, because what we do is we work on customer focused projects and we deliver projects, right? And it was interesting, but it was interesting the way this guy was recruited in the first place. And it's I think the EQ, it's all very well trying to be right and wrong, but it's EQ actually identifies what actually are these things. And some of these things are not that clear, Nick. And I think if you get the EQ right, then you begin to actually identify this is actually not an R&D business, and leaders should therefore adjust and recruit the right type of people to fit it. So that's another observation product-wise.
Definitely. Like, it's like you can see the pressured businesses to recruit where, you know, or some of the crazy businesses where they've gone through a transactional deal and they have targets on headcount, right? Yeah. And that's when, if you ever want to lose culture, put a load of hiring targets in front of someone and you'll get there pretty quickly. Like, budgets go out the window, you mismanage everyone, you know, and then they, yeah, just a whole minefield to navigate there. And David, obviously a big array of things out here. Any closing statement from you?
Just get to know the why of your senior team. If you're a business leader, and if you're, you know, manager, just understand the people, understand their why. What, you know, who are they as a person, and why are they working here? Most people now, you can go and work for anybody. If you're working from home a good chunk of your time, the employment market is very open for you. You can work for any company pretty much anywhere in the world. So why you? And how do you make that as sticky as possible for them and invest into them?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, coming back to the growth, some of the biggest growth businesses I've seen who are really going at winning at success are really enforcing people returning to the office, and they're winning, which is really interesting, actually. So I'm sort of tracking that trend to try and understand what is that about, and also which elements of the business, right? I think every element is so different. Right? It's a massive generalization to say everyone coming back. Like, does John in accounts need to be there Monday to Thursday? Like, I think he's evidenced no, most of the times. But there are definitely days where they need to be there. And also to humanize them to the rest of the business as well, and actually make it work. So I'm going to be monitoring that, see what that is, and I think maybe we can do an episode. Oh, go on. You
just asked what that is. When I go about relationships and profit, what I mean by is testing our actions versus that is about relationships, Nick, without any doubt at all. So I think every decision we make as leaders should be primarily around relationships. And so, surprise, surprise, that business is growing because they've got the relationships right. Simple as that.
Well, I also think it's the leader being honest about themselves, knowing that maybe they're a paranoid person who, frankly, if they don't see them, doesn't trust someone, and that's maybe a failing of theirs. But yeah, if that means that they're actually more efficient and helping people because of it, rather than sitting at home freaking out if people are working or not, then good for them. I think that's them being honest, and I think the honesty wins out most of the time in these sort of worlds, as long as the right kind of honesty. So on the right subject matter. But guys, Tom, David, thank you as always for coming through this. Thank you for the questions coming in. Hopefully that's useful. Reach out to us if you want to expand on that. We're doing some incredibly cool coaching, turnaround and growth sessions at the moment with clients. Like, it's massively impactful. Everyone is acting like we've got this all sorted and everything's back to normal. Like, nothing's back to normal that we know of, and we're all rusty. Like, every business we're going into engaging with, they're good, they're brilliant. There's a lot of room for improvement. There is a lot of assumptions that have been made through this period of time, and now that we're so busy, it's even more slipping through the cracks, right? I think it's time to sort of carve out time to make sure you're developing your teams, your people, yourself. So when you can power on and succeed more. So if you want to go through any of that, understand what's the type of work we've done with from VC clients to big tech firms, to banks, to law firms, to automotive, like, everyone's different, but everyone's got the same problems. I'd love to talk you through them and help you address them and push on. But thank you for tuning in, and we will catch up with you all very, very soon. All the best.